Anyone doing something? Is that right there? Yeah? Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4. I want to thank you all for coming. I want to thank the candidates very much for coming along to the Pembrokeshire People First Hustings. I'm going to introduce very briefly the candidates. So, from my far right, from your left, I'd like to introduce Frances Bryant, who's the candidate for the Green Party. She's originally from Somerset. She attended university in Lampeter and completely fell in love with West Wales. Participated in many conservation projects about keeping our countryside and our lands and our history together. Frances lives in Fishguard and runs a small business and joined the Green Party 2 years ago after running out of patience with the way politics seem to put money and profit before ordinary people and the environment. Next to Frances is John Osmond, who's Plaid Cymru's candidate for Preseli Pembrokeshire. John says he has strong roots in the county, was brought up in Little Haven and Abergavenny, which is close to the Welsh border. He stood in the Preseli 2007 Welsh Assembly elections and was the leader of a successful campaign in that year to prevent Withybush Hospital being downgraded, which means being made less important. One of the main reasons John says he's standing now is the current renewed threat to emergency services in the hospital. John's a writer and a journalist, founded the Institute of Welsh Affairs, and did a lot of work, and I'm summarising this, John, around developing the National Assembly. Chris Overton is an independent candidate. His party is Save Withybush, Save Lives. Chris says, age 55, 4 children, 2 grandchildren. He's been a doctor for 33 years and consultant, big word alert, obstetrician and gynaecologist, so women's health, for the last 16 years, and the chairman of SWAT, which is the Save Withybush campaign, for the last 10 years. Paul Miller is the Labour Party candidate. Paul says he was born and raised in Pembrokeshire and has had to fight hard to make sure he can stay here while having a good job with a fair wage. He says it shouldn't be that hard, but for more and more people it's the reality. There's a few issues that Paul says he's particularly focusing on. Healthcare, a job that pays in an industry to be proud of, children and trust in Pembrokeshire politics. Just give me a tiny weeny bio on married, children, tell me that stuff.
I'm not married yet, I've not got children yet. My girlfriend and I do live together in Nayland, albeit kind of, it's all up in the air a little bit at the moment, as you can imagine, because I'm either going to be the MP in 3 weeks' time or I'm not. And once we've got that out of the way, Soph and I will be settled in Pembrokeshire.
Last but not least, Howard Billingham, the UKIP candidate.
I'm 62, I live with my lady friend. I'm not from this part of the world, although I fell in love with West Wales many years ago. I moved down here 13 years ago. I'm originally from Oxfordshire. I used to work for Oxford University and I took early retirement from there. Like many English people, we come down here on holiday to Pembrokeshire and fall in love with the county and we don't go back. That's a little bit about me. I stand for the UK Independence Party, and we all know that as UKIP.
So there's your candidates, guys, and as I say, we've got 6 questions from our membership.
The last government wanted to save 20% by changing from disability living allowance to PIP. This means a quarter of the people will not get the new benefit and may not be able to live independently anymore. What will you promise to do to stop this?
Nobody said that the system would change at the last election, and I think you were very badly let down by the current coalition government, who said, you know, we will make cuts, but they won't affect frontline services. Well, I'm afraid, Lucy, that's not what's happening. Frontline services, which means things that go out to you to help you live your lives, help you get out into the communities and help you with your feeding, eating, changing, people and social care perhaps as well. They're all being cut back. And in the Green Party, we are 100% opposed to that. We don't agree with that at all. We believe that everybody in society is of value. Everybody deserves dignity. Everybody should have the chance to participate no matter what their situation in life. So it's incredibly important to us to get that funding restored.
In this election, which is one of the main issues in the election, is about the problem of the deficit. The deficit is basically the difference between what you get into your budget and what you spend. So basically, we are continually spending more on public services and all the rest the government spends on, compared with how much we're raising in taxes. So we're raising less amount of money in taxes than we're actually spending, and to cover the gap, we borrow money, and that is the deficit. And over time, the deficit builds up, which creates the debt, what's called the national debt. And the national debt is very high, and it's a problem because we have to service the debt, we have to pay interest on the debt. So that's a fundamental problem that the British economy has. And the whole argument really is about how you tackle that problem. And the Conservative government, supported by the Liberal Democrats, say we have to cut services, we have to cut spending in order to narrow the deficit. And on the other hand, we, the Greens, and the SNP in Scotland are saying, no, what we should do is we should invest properly in more jobs and in creating big projects which employ more people who then will pay more taxes to bring more income for the government. And that's the basic argument. That's a question of, no one is disagreeing that we have to get rid of the deficit at some point. It's a question of how you do that and how quickly.
Hi, I'm a consultant, I'm a doctor. I've been a doctor for 33 years. I care about people. A doctor means that you care about people. So I care about the fact that the Conservative Liberal Democrat coalition have carried out what's called a severe austerity agenda. Austerity means basically squeezing down on the poor and the people who need their help and making them suffer more. So I'm absolutely against that. I would not in any way vote for anything that would make that worse. I vote against it. Unfortunately, with the Westminster governments, both the Conservative and the Labour Party will be carrying on that austerity. And if I was elected, I would join the same group that John and Francis have been talking about to fight against austerity, fight against that squeeze down on public services. Throughout the whole of the time that I've been a doctor, I've never carried out private practice. I've solely been to the NHS because I believe in the NHS and I believe in public services, and I believe that people should be looked after by the state.
The entire focus of those changes to the programme were about saving money. As Lucy rightly said, they knew that they wanted to save 20% of the money they put into what was the disability living allowance when they started. It wasn't about a genuine exercise to assess people better and to support them better. It was about taking money away from those people who were receiving that support. The government that we have at the moment, the Conservative-led government at the moment, has put a lot of time and energy into taking money out of the system, and it's all been about reducing the level of support that you guys get and that people living with disabilities are getting. I think the minister in charge of this programme said once that losing a limb, for example, shouldn't necessarily mean that you require support. That can't be the right framework.
I'm really surprised that the figure of 20% that you said, that's a huge amount of cut in your disability living allowance. But it's a huge amount of cut, but we've needed cuts in this country, not in that way, but because we owe so much money. We've got a massive debt, £1.5 trillion. It's a huge figure. None of us can imagine the sort of amount that is, and we need to get that down. How we do it is really important, and we need to target it. But part of that debt problem is the interest payment. People don't lend you money without getting something back in return, and that return is called the interest. And we are paying a huge amount in interest on that debt. That's why we need to get it down. And if we carry on at the rate we're going, it's going to be hundreds of years before we pay this debt off. But UKIP believes that we should look at where we're spending money. And part of what we spend £11 billion a year on sending that money in international aid to people abroad. Now that is sometimes to governments to help them with projects. We believe that's wrong. We think charity begins at home, and we should be using that money here in Britain to people like yourself.
With your permission, Lucy, I'm just going to run very quickly along the panel and ask you, would you get rid of the PIP? So just straightforward. Francis?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Chris? Paul?
Less straightforward.
But quick.
Yeah, very quickly. So I think personal independence payments will be here to stay in the Labour government, but I do think we make the system completely different. It'll be about supporting people first and foremost, not taking money out of the system. And we're also going to set up a group, an independent group of people with disabilities who will look after the scrutiny role for that system to make sure it's not about taking money out, it's about supporting people properly into the future.
I don't support it, no.
All the parties say they want to have hard-working people with benefits cuts, lack of jobs and lack of support. We need to work. It is impossible for us. That makes us feel we don't count. What will you do to change this?
We do need to encourage more jobs into the county by encouraging businesses and companies to come down here and open up. But part of the problem is we live in a lovely county on the end of a peninsula, you know, a piece of land, and Pembrokeshire's wonderful, but it's a long way from the middle of the country, and we have a problem with transport. So to encourage businesses down here, we need to improve the transport links, roads into the county, we need to improve the rail links into the county, the trains, and we need to use the resources that we've got here better to attract business here to make jobs for people. Then you will get more jobs for disabled people. We really need to offer tax cuts to companies to say, will you take disabled people on, and in return we will reduce part of your tax bill.
The Howard is right, there is a major problem in Pembrokeshire with jobs and opportunities for people right across the board, and we need to address that. But looking specifically at your question, one about the rhetoric about work paying when actually sometimes people can't work. Well, we do need absolutely to support those people who can't work. But I visited Frame on Thursday, and they do a fantastic job as well of offering opportunities to people who perhaps otherwise wouldn't be able to get jobs and enter the jobs market. And I think innovative things like that, so new ideas like that with social enterprises supporting people who otherwise find it difficult to get jobs is really, really important. But so too is making clear that where people can't work through no fault of their own, they should be supported properly by the state, looked after properly, and supported in leading independent lives.
Obviously, I'm new to politics, and I think this sort of issue should have been addressed by the main political parties over the last 50 years. I'm distressed that it's not addressed and not been addressed properly. Everybody should be able to do the work that they want to do, and there should be facilities made available for this to happen. And it should have been done not now, not last year, but 10, 20 years ago. And it's wrong. And I agree with you that we should provide services to everybody so that they can all get the job that they want to do to make their life feel more worthwhile.
I want briefly to go back to the last question, which bears on this in terms of how the cuts are handled. We think in Plaid Cymru, along the Greens and the SNP again, that it's morally actually wrong to actually direct most of the cuts at the less worst off in society. It is the better off that should be paying to tackle the fundamental economic problems we have. So instead of cutting benefits, we should be increasing taxation on those who are better off in society. I mean, under the last government, the better off have had their taxes reduced, which is quite wrong. So that's the fundamental approach that we have. On the question of jobs for people with learning problems, we think that the public sector organisations like education, like in hospitals and so on, there should be a quota of the jobs that those organisations have that are reserved for those with disabilities and learning difficulties.
I, like you, am sick and tired of people saying about hard-working families. There's an awful lot of people living in this country who A, aren't part of a big family, B, cannot work, and C, don't want to be labelled as someone who is, in the government's word, a scrounger. Nobody is a scrounger in this country, that everyone tries to work hard for themselves and for their families, and also to be put into that category, I think, is wrong. We need groups such as Pembrokeshire People First who do excellent work, going out, explaining to people the difficulties you all face, and explaining to employers, perhaps as well, that they can help. They can perhaps put aside a job that would be easy to do, perhaps that you could go and work at yourselves, get some money, and feel that you're working and contributing as well.
Pembrokeshire People First members are passionate about our human rights. What do you promise to do to protect the Human Rights Act?
So I'll keep this very, very simple. We're absolutely committed to the Human Rights Act. There will be no messing with it, no repeal of the Human Rights Act under a Labour government. Absolutely not.
Well, part of that is tied up with the European Union and our membership of that. We, as you know, we want to come out of the European Union. But what we want to create is what we call a British Bill of Rights. That will be a constitutionally written Bill of Rights that you, as a person in Britain, will be able to look at, and it will protect you. That is a Bill of Rights. We've never had one before in this country. That's what we propose to introduce.
Could you explain to me, Harold, how the Human Rights Act is linked in with Europe? It's a UK piece of legislation about UK courts.
It is, but it's ultimately overseen by the European Court of Human Rights, oversees what goes on in this country. If something is disagreed with in the British courts, it can then get taken to the European Court of Human Rights, and we don't agree that the European Court should have rights over what goes on in Britain. We think it should be run and created by the British government, who you're voting for in 3 weeks' time.
Harold, I think you're a little bit confused. The Human Rights Act and the European Court of Human Rights has nothing to do with the European Union. It's a separate body, and it's run for the benefit of the entire continent. Human rights are absolutely fundamental to everything the Greens believe in. We would strengthen, we would not pull out of the Human Rights Act. It is vital that every single person who lives in this country, and in fact in the world, should have their rights respected. It's absolutely fundamental to our philosophy.
Part of the reason I'm on this panel, part of the reason I'm standing, is because I actually believe that our human rights have been challenged by the Labour-led Welsh Government. The services at Withybush, which is the reason I'm standing, are under threat, and they're under threat because of cutbacks by the Labour-led Welsh Government. I absolutely believe that everybody's human rights should be maintained, and children and women and babies are being put in danger, and their human rights are being affected by the changes at Withybush.
I'm really alarmed at the position being taken by the Tories in particular, UKIP as well, who fundamentally seem to want to put a drawbridge around the United Kingdom. The important thing about the European Convention on Human Rights is that it embraces the whole of the EU. It embraces the whole and wider than that, in fact. And so therefore, it's about protecting the human rights of society across the world. And the idea that if we pull out of that and try and construct our own British version of it, we don't support human rights in an international way. And that's really important. I mean, the European Convention on Human Rights was created in 1951, as I recall. It was supported by Winston Churchill, of all people. And the Conservatives want to, and UKIP obviously as well, want to resign or want to break away from that. It is a form of nationalism of its worst kind. And I speak as a Welsh nationalist.
Our members don't think the bedroom tax is fair, and some of our members have had no money for heating because of it. Do you promise to scrap this unfair tax?
So absolutely we do. And one crucial thing about this is the Labour Party is likely, and I hope, to be in a position after this election where we can do that. We'll have enough MPs, particularly if I get elected here in Pembrokeshire, to make that happen. And I absolutely promise you that one of the first pieces of legislation we will draft with the government will be to end the bedroom tax.
Well, I'm afraid on past experience shows on a range of issues that the London-based parties, whatever they say in the constituencies in places like Preseli, you can't trust them when they get to London. If you look at the Dems, look what they did over student fees. They said they were going to scrap student fees before the last election. They went into bed with Conservatives and they put them up. That's just typical. So we are saying that no party is likely to be in a majority after the election. If you want things like the bedroom tax scrapped, then the only sure way of seeing that actually happen is a strong group of Pride Candidate, SNP and Greens in Westminster to shore up the conviction of the Labour Party, which needs shoring up like nothing else.
The answer is yes. It is in our manifesto to get rid of the bedroom tax if we get into power or have any chance of being able to do so. It's wrong, it's not working, there are not enough smaller homes, 1 and 2 bedroom homes, where people who have homes with empty bedrooms, because that's what it's about, can move into. It's not working, and why should somebody move out of a family home that they've lived in for a lot of years to move to somewhere smaller, just so they can carry on getting the benefit that they got before. So we would scrap the bedroom tax.
I totally agree with everyone else on the panel. The bedroom tax is a terrible, terrible idea. Most of the people that are affected by the bedroom tax have some sort of disability. They need perhaps carers staying over. They need equipment. Their houses have actually been altered to suit them. I mean, the fact that you're being asked to move from that and then create a whole new level of expense for the government is just balmy, actually. It's mad. So yes, the Greens would definitely scrap the bedroom tax, no question.
If you are elected, what will you do to show your support for people with learning disabilities and autism?
Coming here today and meeting you guys and finding out what your organisation does for you and for the community is really important, and I think we as potential politicians need to come to these organisations, and I think as a politician you need to keep coming back again and revisiting and talking to people so that we can then go to Westminster and put the case forward and speak passionately from the heart to say, I know these people, I know what they're struggling with, this is what we need to do to make their life easier.
So I aim to get elected and try and get on something called the Health Select Committee, which is a very powerful committee in Westminster and helps to decide on policies. I've learned, when I went to the National Autistic Society meeting on Wednesday and again today, that there's a real problem with the way that the Labour and Conservative governments over the last 25 years have not really done much for you. And we really need to redress the balance and get back to a proper NHS and proper social care facilities and help for people who need it.
I think it's crucial if you're elected that we come and meet you on a regular basis. We have talks, we can come to see some of your debates that you have amongst yourself. I mean, I would like to get very involved in that, and I think it's very important to be able to represent all sorts of spectrums of people, to actually get their opinions, to get their living the lives. They need to tell us what it is that would help them the most.
I have some experience of the difficulties we talk about in my own family. I have a son who's dyslexic, I have a nephew who has Asperger's syndrome, and a cousin who has autistic children. Through all this experience, what I've learned more than anything else is the importance of early diagnosis of these conditions, so that proper help can be brought, or there's a chance of some proper help to address the conditions. So I think what should happen, and what I would press for if I'm elected, is for early screening of every child in our schools at appropriate age, whether that be around 5, 6 or 7, screening for all these conditions so they can be identified as early as possible and appropriate help marshalled.
So I think the voice of those people living with disabilities and various conditions that affect the way that they can live their lives is the single most important thing I can do. Listening to and empowering that voice. So making your voice as loud as I possibly can. Working with Pembrokeshire's people first and other groups to make sure that what you're interested in, what's important to you, what's affecting your life is heard loud and clear by everyone who needs to hear it. But on a national level, so in London, it's about making sure that everything we do is about compassion, about caring, and about supporting people to live independent lives.
How can we trust you to do the things you say you are going to do?
It's really difficult, isn't it? Politicians say one thing, they get into power, and 180 degrees, which means completely the opposite, they do the exact opposite. And do you know, that's what got me interested in politics in the first place then, because I used to vote for the Liberal Democrats. And I voted for them because I didn't want them to prop up the Tories. And what happened? They went straight into government, propped up the Tories, did exactly everything they said they weren't going to do in their manifestos. The Green Party is one of, well, I should think almost one of the only parties, one of the very few parties to say it's going to do something and stick by its principles year in, year out. We don't say things that we think are going to be popular, that everyone's going to agree with. We say things that we believe in, and then we hope that people agree with us and will stand with us. We will never change our principles, which means the things we believe in most. You can absolutely depend on the Green Party member to say and do the same things as their manifesto.
We are intent on trying to get rid of the Conservative-led coalition, and we understand that the only actual real alternative in Westminster to enter number 10 is Ed Miliband. He's the only actual alternative to do that. But we are standing in order to ensure that Ed Miliband sticks to his principles. So by electing a strong group of SNP, Plaid Cymru and Greens, that's the best way you have of ensuring that the Labour Party actually sticks up for their own principles.
Well, obviously I'm not a professional politician, I'm a doctor. There's quite a few jokes about trust me, I'm a doctor, but I can tell you that you can trust me. I will be fighting for health and social care to be improved, to the cuts to the health service in particular, especially at Willie Bush, that have happened over the last 25 years under both the largest parties. I will be fighting to reverse those cuts and try and get the NHS back to what it should be.
So this is the impossible question, isn't it? I can sit here and I can say I promise I'm trustworthy when no one else is, and you're going to think, yeah, that's a promise that he might or he might not keep. All I can say to you is that the only reason I'm involved in any way in parish politics is because I want to do what's right for this county. I hope that since I've been involved, I've always done what I thought was right. I know I have. I want to get stuck in and I want to fight for you. And I will do my best by Pembrokeshire every single time I need to make a decision.
Well, we in UKIP want to introduce a system called recall of MP. In other words, if your MP is not doing his job properly, then if there's a petition signed by so many members of the public, that MP could be recalled, or certainly could be made to stand account. We've seen a few years ago of the expenses scandal, where MPs were claiming for things that, well, many of us just wouldn't have believed was possible, and including ours example. And we believe that MPs should be made to be accountable to the electorate, to you, the voters in the constituency. We want to make it that they have to stand up and be seen to be fair and above board.
My question is, we have had clients that have had benefits stopped because they either have a mental health problem and cannot get to sign on, or one gentleman has an epileptic fit and therefore for some reason couldn't get to sign on, and their benefits get sanctioned. I have a real passion about mental health problems, and I see this happening so frequently. The connection between mental health issues and poverty are huge. And I'd like to know what you would do to prevent this, so that people that really struggle to get to the job centre to sign on will have special dispensation.
What do they think people are going to do if they're sanctioned? What are they supposed to do? It's all very well if you've got a family who may be able to help you out. Some people are literally left destitute, which is why another 1 million people have been forced to visit food banks in the 6th richest country in the world. It's totally unacceptable. We believe very strongly in the Green Party that, as I said before, everyone has a right to a good standard of living, to proper help when they become unemployed or if they're disabled.
Either the state can be there to support and help people to get a job, and of course we want people to be in work. But it's almost, stripping it down to the basics, it's kind of carrot and stick. Have you all heard that phrase? Carrot being helping and supporting people, giving them an incentive to get back into work. Stick being kind of hit the donkey on the backside and say, how we go to work. That's the choice here. We can either support people compassionately, try and help people back into work, or we can take the approach where we punish those who aren't able to. And that's what the Conservative Party has done for the last 5 years. They've punished and waged war on those poorest and most vulnerable in British society, and we absolutely have to stop them. The Labour Party and I will not allow that war on the most vulnerable in society to continue.
I really support my hospital, especially the baby care unit. If it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be here. I'm wondering, what are you going to do to help to keep the services or move the services back to Labour?
There's a real crisis at the moment where the deanery, which are the people who organise training for young doctors, are now threatening to take away the trainees in medicine. And if the trainees in medicine are taken away, then the whole hospital will fall down, because there won't be a medical rota, and people with problems with their heart and lungs will not be able to be seen. The A&E facility will almost certainly go down to 12 hours and become not much better than a minor injuries unit. It's a real crisis at the moment. And unfortunately, Paul on my left here is a member of the Labour Party, and the people who are doing this to our services are the Labour-led Welsh Government.
For things like accident and emergency, for things like maternity-led, for consultant-led maternity services, the key emergency services, everybody as a human right should be entitled to be within a reasonable distance.
Welsh Government, Wales,
has had a 10% reduction in its funding over the last 5 years. Now that's the Conservative administration in Westminster gives the Welsh Government all its money, and they cut that by 10%. The Welsh Government only really spend money, big money, on 3 things. That's local government, which is transport, social care, some of the things we talked about earlier, education, which is obviously schools and colleges and further education in places like Cardiff and Swansea and Aberystwyth, and health. So they have no choice but to make changes to their budget in Wales, and obviously that's affected our services. It's affected our services badly, and if there's a Labour government in Westminster after this election, there will be more money for Wales, and as a result our services will have more money to improve and to change.
What are you going to do to help vulnerable people stop being isolated?
We need better public transport. We need bus services that are running more regularly. So Rhiannon, you can jump on the bus and go to wherever you want to go, you know, for your treatment or whatever it is you want. You know, we do need to improve bus services, but the important thing is, it's important for people to use those buses.
Obviously in the Green Party, we're all for getting people back onto public transport. Really what we need is proper subsidies so that people can get round, make the bus companies put proper services on, and actually start to bring rail back into public ownership so that it's for us, it's not to make money. We want to bring prices down and make sure that everyone can have a chance to get out and about, perhaps using something a bit like the Oyster card, where you can just jump on a bus or train, get round, and then it's better for the environment and better for you.
Our members tell us that they often feel unsafe on the streets at night. How are you going to help us?
I can understand why people who feel vulnerable anyway would feel more vulnerable walking around, especially if you walk around on your own, or do you tend to walk around in a group?
People got activity, they all get picked up.
I think that's totally wrong that people should get picked on, and I'm sure if you came to the place where I drink, which is the Lady Club on Jew Street, you definitely wouldn't get picked on. So I think you've got to choose your places really, because some people are very cruel.
I think we all on this panel would agree that anybody who's picked on because of their disability, it's disgraceful, and we need to, as was said earlier, educate people better. I think it's important that organisation like you've got here is more open, that people can come in and see you at work and how you are and can interact with you better. So we think we should certainly help with groups of people. You know, somebody said, you know, people should stick together more as a group so that, you know, you've got a bit of a friend with you, you know, to go out with somebody, just moral support more than anything. You know, as Chris said, you know, don't go in areas where you know you are going to get picked on. Go to somewhere where you know you've got some friends.
Yeah, I don't agree with you there, Hal. I don't think it should be trying for you guys to protect yourselves from hate crime that's out there, or whatever. It's for society to deal with that, I think.
Many services for young people with learning disabilities and autism are being cut. Transition offers very few choices for them. What will you do to improve this?
We are at a fork in the road in this election. If we carry on with a Conservative-led government, they've announced that there's going to be more cuts in benefits. It's part of an ideologically driven wish to reduce the size of the state and increase the size of the market, out of which the friends of the Tories could make money, and that is the choice that you're faced with. So I advise you to vote for it.
If you're in government, you have a huge sum of money that you can use in different ways. And it's how you use those sums of money that really make the difference. So obviously, money spent on the most vulnerable in society is actually saving money in a way, because the more they have help, the more help they're given, the less they have to have money spent on them further down the line.
Big question, what would you spend our taxes on?
National health, obviously. We've committed another £3 billion a year towards the national health. It's vital that we spend money on the NHS. We've committed some more money to defence. We want to honour our commitment to NATO to spend 2% of our money.
Health and education are absolutely priorities for a future Labour government. But one thing I want to make clear, we're not going to cut this deficit, or we're not going to cut our spending without raising some taxes for those who can most afford to pay. So those people who have money in this country, we feel need to make a slightly bigger contribution to maintaining the services that we've all talked about so far.
I would vote to create and use the taxes to create a safe and caring society.
Well, I'll tell you what I wouldn't spend on is Trident, right? That would release quite a lot of money for which we could spend things on. And like everyone else, I think probably in this room, our priorities are health and education.
I think the majority of the money raised in this country should go to making our society healthy and comfortable and safe. And I don't mean safe in as much as spending lots of money on military. I think we spend far too much on things like Trident. I think we need to spend it on helping people, making sure that society works well for everybody.
First of all, I'd very much like to thank our candidates. I don't know if it was the most difficult hustings as previous ones were, but thank you for your honesty. Enjoyable. That's splendid. Could we move the candidates around?